Hey guys, Zombie here, and welcome back to another Back 4 Blood beta video. Now today we're going to jump into some PvP content for the first time, and I'm going to tell you about the strongest PvP zombie in the game, in my opinion. And I've seen this a little bit, I've seen the sentiment around, but I haven't really seen a huge in-depth kind of guide in how to upgrade them correctly, in what order, and kind of what their strengths and weaknesses are. So I kind of wanted to just jump in and go over that with you guys, so you guys can maybe have a little bit more fun, be a little bit stronger in your PvP games. Before we jump into that though, I was looking at the stats and noticed just under 99% of the people who watched my videos in the last 28 days are not subscribed, and I'm going to tell you, most of these views are from Back 4 Blood viewers, so if you're interested in Back 4 Blood, gameplay, guides, anything you really need, definitely go down and subscribe right now. I've been streaming a lot on my Twitch if you want to watch some of it live. And also join my Discord to get notified whenever I upload or go live on Twitch. Everything you need is in the description below. I also have a clips channel now, I almost forgot to mention, with some funny clips over there, so check that out too while you're down there. Without any further ado, let's get into the video. Let's jump straight into what all of you came here to know, and who's the strongest zombie in the game, in terms of PvP. And this zombie is under the Stinger class, but is not the Stinger themselves, it is actually the Hawker. Now, the Hawker is pretty unique among the available zombies. There's one zombie in each class that is currently unavailable in the beta that will be in the full game, so I can't comment on those. This is really a beta video, and maybe it'll be the same in the full game. It probably won't, and I will make a new guide when the full game comes out. So if you're in the future and you're watching this a few months from now, check my channel, see if there's a new video with the full release, and maybe watch that instead. Or maybe watch the whole thing and then watch that one, who knows? Jokes aside, for the beta, it's going to be the Hawker. And why is that? So, the Hawker has a lot of strengths. It's one of the two zombies that can completely immobilize a survivor, being the Hawker or the Rusher. But the Hawker can do it from a distance. It's a ranged attack that pins them in place. They can't move. Where the Charger has to get all the way in and grab them, leaving them completely open to getting attacked from every other alive survivor. Another huge strength the Hawker has is the ability to jump into and out of combat, or into and out of fights very quickly to keep themselves alive. Something you've noticed if you've played the PvP at all is that the respawn timers as a zombie are about 15 seconds or so, no matter what. Maybe it's a little bit varied here and there and I haven't noticed, but I've pretty consistently seen 15 seconds all the time. And that's a pretty long time. You want to kill them ideally in maybe 3.5 minutes or so at the latest. Sometimes there's different situations where it's not a full game or whatever, but ideally you want to take them out fairly quickly. And to do, in order to do that the most effectively, you want to stay alive as best you can. And the Hawker is able to jump in, rattle off a few hits and jump right back out. And some of their abilities actually complement this, which we'll go over all the abilities and what to spec into first and whatever in just a few minutes. Before we hop into that, I wanted to go over just a couple of the weaknesses that I've noticed through my time of playing, and the biggest one is just the low max HP, and that's understandable. It's not a tall boy variant, it's not a bruiser or a crusher, and it's not meant to be a tank, so obviously it has low health. But I do believe this weakness is not as severe because of the ability to get into and out of combat, like I mentioned a second ago, being able to keep themselves alive in different ways than just being able to brute force your way through and just tank all the bullets. But this is definitely something you have to keep in mind because you are very squishy as a Hawker. Kind of following along the same train of thought, you don't want to take on multiple survivors at once. It's not really what the Hawker is kitted to do. It's not what the abilities are meant for. It's not, obviously, like I just said, it's not a tank. You can't really eat all the bullets. So you're going to look for really people who are a little bit away from the rest of the team if possible. Or it can even be a support, as some of your other zombies, like the other tall boy variant who's playing with you is pushing in. You can kind of try to maybe get in and get out while they're kind of distracting them a little bit. So I keep mentioning these different upgrades that can help with certain situations. So let's just quickly go over all of the upgrades, what they do, and then I'll kind of tell you how I would personally kit out my Hawker. And actually, it's a little bit different than some of the gameplay you're seeing, depending on how I edit this. I haven't edited yet, I'm commentating first. So if you see how I'm speccing in the actual games, it's actually slightly different than I do. I think I found a little better way to do it, and I'll explain everything in just a second here. First, let's go over all of the individual upgrades. So there's 3 different trees you can unlock along the way to, getting to a max Hawker, which you really won't really get to in a normal game unless your whole team is doing it on purpose to maybe try to see just how it works, but you're not going to get everything in one game. really ever, unless you get to around 3, which generally doesn't happen anyway right now. But I'll go over all of them anyway. So the first tree we're going to go through is the defense tree with the defensive upgrades. So level 1 for 50 mutation points gives you, when you leap, which is, you know, your way you get in and out of combat, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and I'm sure you'll see on screen a ton during the gameplay that I put over this. When you leap, you increase your damage resistance by 30% for 8 seconds. And this is huge because I'm not sure if it's a bug or if they just coded it wrong, but the leap has 0 cooldown whatsoever. You can land and immediately leap again, which I think is broken. I want to believe it's an error because it's so strong. But regardless, right now, this is great because having damage resistance on an already squishy zombie is going to be big to try to mitigate some damage you're taking. Especially because if you're jumping in, you should be full health. If you're jumping out, you're trying to get out of a situation where you might die. So the damage resistance can definitely help. And you're probably going to be in that fight for well under 8 seconds. So you have damage resistance the whole time you're there and when you're on your way out. Next up, level 2 for 150 additional mutation points, you have Lifesteal. Dealing damage to a cleaner heals the stinger for 5 health. Now, this doesn't seem like a lot, but with how squishy it is, and also that your projectile pin does damage, this can actually add up while you're jumping in, doing some hits, and jumping out. It might keep you alive in certain situations. I think it's pretty good, but I'll go into how I would spec it in a minute after we go through all the upgrades. The third one's reactive speed. When you take damage, it increases your movement speed by 30% for 4 seconds, and that's going to cost you 350 mutation points on top of the other ones. This one's pretty straightforward. You take damage, you move a little quicker. Level 4, the final of this tree, another 750 mutation points on top, Armored. Gain armor covering weak spots, and also you get plus 50% health, which is insane. The extra health, and it covers your weak spot. Your crit point on a Hawker is the chest. The front part, you know, not your back, but your chest particularly. I'm not sure if it counts if they hit you in the back, in like your chest area, but on the back side. But I know, obviously, from the front, it definitely does. So being able to protect your weak point and get 50% additional health, I think is massive. So now we're going to move on to the offensive upgrades. Level 1, it's the same number of mutation points for each upgrade, 50 for the first one. Execute, deal 2 bonus damage to cleaners below 50% health. Now 2 sounds like a very small amount, but when you remember they really only have about 100 to 150 health depending on the cards, maybe a little bit more if they somehow overheal, because certain cards let you do that. But I mean, I haven't seen a survivor over 200 HP in PvP ever. So 2 bonus damage is actually quite a bit. It's about 2% on a 100 health survivor, just under like 1.5% on a 150 health survivor. My math might be wrong there, but just roll with it. You know, it's a decent amount per hit. So if it's a projectile or if you hit them with your melee attack, it all counts towards the bonus damage, which I think is big. Level 2, 150 additional mutation points, Empowered Cling. Deal 30% increased damage while wall clinging and up to 4 seconds afterwards. Now, wall clinging is an ability that I believe the whole class has, not just the Hawker, the whole Stinger class, where if you use your leap into a wall, you can stick to that wall and kind of just hold on to the wall and cling to the wall. Now, I've never seen this used, and in my head, I think it's not great, just as not even just this upgrade in particular, but just the clinging mechanic overall. Because if you're clinging somewhere where you can get your projectile off, that means they can also see you, where, for the most part, when you're trying to pin your opponents, you're going to want to barely peek either up over a roof or kind of just walk into a doorway, use your projectile, and get out of the way again. You don't really want to have your full body exposed for an elongated period of time where they can just shoot you, considering you have such low health. Again, I'll talk more about the order and upgrades and stuff. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Let's jump right into the level 3 upgrade for an additional 350 mutation points. You have Quick Recovery. Now, the exhausted duration is reduced by 2 seconds. Now, you might be wondering, what's the exhausted duration? Because it doesn't actually explain this anywhere in-game that I could see. And I'm hoping in the full game they'll have a better explanation of some of these things, because I had to figure this out on my own. I was kind of confused for a while. But you'll notice, whenever I do a melee attack, which somewhere in the gameplay that's going on, you should be able to see that. Whenever I use the melee attack, on the bottom left, where those buffs and debuffs are popping up, you'll see a counter going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Every time I do a melee attack, it goes up by 1. And you'll notice that my attacks are getting slower and slower for each increment of those stacks. Now, and then if I don't die and I jump away, you'll see that meter decreases until it goes all the way to the bottom, and then that whole debuff goes away. So that's exhaustion. When you hit over and over and over again, you go slower and slower and slower. And the way to reset that is to let a certain number of seconds go by for the debuff to completely go away, and then you can hit at full speed again. And it obviously racks back up. So the first hit's super fast, the second one's slightly less fast, but still super fast. The third one's slightly slower again, and it goes all the way down until super, super slow at 8 stacks. I think this one's not great because, for the most part, you're going to hit about 5 or 6 times generally and then jump out. Maybe you get to 8, but regardless, you shouldn't be standing there the whole time, letting your exhaustion go down, then hit again. You should be jumping away, so this really doesn't matter. And then you have level 4, 750 mutation points, sneak attack. Every 8 seconds, your next attack is empowered and deals plus 100% damage. Now, I don't hate this. I think this is decent. So basically every 8 seconds, the buff comes back up and your next hit, whether that be a projectile or a melee attack, does double damage. Now that can be big, I think, but I'm kind of on the fence about it, and that's because your projectile does damage, so it could double that damage. And once you hit someone with a projectile, about, at least 60 to 70% of the time, you're going to jump straight in and try to attack them. Some situations there's other survivors immediately around, other cleaners who might immediately break them out. So maybe you jump in, jump straight back out. Maybe you don't jump in at all. You just let the damage kind of rack up from your pin attack. I think if you have 2 Hawkers, which most games should, and I'll do another video on like team comps, but for right now, when we're focusing on the Hawker, as a solo Hawker, this is okay. With 2 Hawkers, this could be huge if one's pinning and one's attacking. But I'll make a whole nother video about team comp and how to kind of spec out a whole team and upgrade the whole team. So let's hop into the final upgrade tree, which is utility. Now, utility is interesting. It has more to do with your movement speed as well as your pin attack, the one that makes it so they can't move. So level 1 for 50 mutation points, mobility, reduces the movement speed penalty while attacking or charging an attack for all Stinger variants, which that's the Stinger is just the overall class. There's one called the Stinger, which I think is weird, but the Hawker is a part of the Stinger class. So that obviously does count for the Hawker. So when they're either doing a melee attack, you move a little bit faster, or when you're charging your pin attack, you move a little faster. There's a huge movement penalty when you have that charged up and you're about to launch your attack that pins them. And this just reduces that penalty a bit, so you can move a little bit quicker while you're winding up and aiming. Level 2, an additional 150 mutation points, blind and damage. Stinger projectiles, again, Stinger is the class, this counts for the Hawker as well. Stinger projectiles also briefly blind their target. Hawker pin and Stalker pounce deal damage over time. After reading that, maybe it's only for Stinger, because it mentioned Stinger, then Hawker and Stalker. So actually, I'm a bit confused, and I really hope they kind of clarify this language, because having a whole class called the Stingers and then having one of them called the Stinger is very confusing. So actually, don't take this with a grain of salt. I'm not sure if that means you also blind. I might have to test it, but there's no custom mode, so I don't know how to test it. So this upgrade might actually not blind survivors when you use your pin, but at the very least, it will do damage over time. And this is good for those situations where you pin someone, but there's people all over the place and you can't jump in. You're doing some damage over time, which gives you some extra mutation points that you try to get a new upgrade. Level 3 for 350 additional mutation points, you have Hinder. The slow applied when damaging a cleaner is increased by 30% and lasts 100% longer. So when you hit a cleaner with a melee attack, because with the pin attack, obviously they can't move at all. When you hit them with a melee attack, they slow down. If you play Valorant, you're familiar when you get shot by a bullet, you slow down a lot. It's the same concept, where if a cleaner gets hit by a zombie, they slow down a bit. This basically makes it so that effect lasts twice as long. It also slows them down 30% more compared to their original slow. And level 4 on utility, for 750 additional mutation points, you have Kill Frenzy. When a cleaner is incapacitated or killed, Stingers gain rapid health regeneration and 30% increased movement speed. And this is pretty straightforward. When a cleaner gets downed or killed, they regen a lot of health and they move a little bit faster. Now, the one thing I'm unclear about on this particular one, because it's really hard to test with no custom games, when you incapacitate a survivor, it's possible they bleed out, which then they get killed. But also, if they get picked up a certain number of times, the next down kills them. If you've played Left 4 Dead or Back 4 Blood on a harder difficulty, you're familiar with, if you get downed, say, 2 or 3 times, and you can adjust it with different cards. But the concept is, if you go down a certain number of times, and then you take damage that would make you go down again, at a certain point, you don't go down anymore, you just die. So I'm unsure. So obviously that it accounts for that, but does it count for a survivor that goes down and then bleeds out? I'm unsure. But this is very niche, and I'll talk about that more with how I would spec out a Hawker build right now, how I would choose my upgrades. So taking a look at all the upgrades, I think the way you should unlock your upgrades in this, in what the order I think you should get defensive leap right at the beginning of the game. So when you jump in and jump out, you have increased damage resistance, which I think is huge to not just instantly die. And if you have two people running it, have the other person get execute, the first one on the offensive upgrade. And if you don't, then just save up for execute next. That'll be your second unlock. The next thing I would do is save up for lifesteal, the next defensive upgrade, to get some health back when you deal damage. This will again help with longevity. Now, coming up next, this is where I would actually change it. I looked closely at the offensive upgrades and realized that really level 2 and level 3 are kind of pointless. Level 2, you're never going to be clinging on a wall, unless it's by accident, to be honest. But you're never going to do it to, like, get a projectile off to pin someone. At least as a Hawker. So, level 2 doesn't matter. Level 3, exhausted duration reduced by 2 seconds. With the Hawker's ability, and really, I guess all the Stinger's ability just to jump away, you should never be standing around cleaners for your exhaustion to reset to hit them quickly again. So that one's also pointless. So I think we're going to leave offensive upgrades or offense upgrades at level 1 for a while. So the next thing I think you should get is the 50 mutation points into your utility upgrade to reduce the movement speed penalty when you're charging up an attack or attacking, doing a melee attack. After that, blind and damage, you want your pin to do damage over time. So not only are they pinned and probably taking damage from you or common infected around them, or even your allies, your other special infected, they're also taking damage over time just from being inside your attack, from being pinned by it. And now we're at the point where I think the utility upgrades are pretty pointless for the whole rest of the way. 3 and 4 I think are not great. Whereas offensive upgrades, I think level 4 is decent. I think it's okay. So now that you have level 2 on defensive, level 1 on offensive, and level 2 on utility, I think you should be saving up for level 4 defensive. So you want to get level 3 and then save up for level 4. You might be saying, well, I have all these mutation points that I can easily put into offense or even utility at a certain point. Why am I saving up for level 4 defense? And like I said, level 2 and 3 offense I think are genuinely pointless for the way that you have to play a Hawker to be useful, in my opinion. And I think the slow you apply by hitting a survivor is largely irrelevant. And then downing someone, level 4, obviously, you'd be able to unlock Armored and Kill Frenzy at the same time if you were there. But I think Kill Frenzy is useless because it only activates when someone goes down, which is so few. Like it's not so few times, but it's very niche. Usually, all the survivors or all the cleaners are going down at about the same time. Not always, but, you know, it's not going to be early in the game. It's kind of pointless for a large majority of your zombie round. It's not going to be active. It also doesn't mention how long your increased movement speed lasts for. If it lasts forever, maybe it's a little bit more useful, but it has the same problem of it's useless for probably 2 minutes or so, at least, of your zombie round at the beginning, where you really want to try to get damage off and get stuff done. So I really think getting armor covering your weak spots, as well as getting 50% bonus health, will give you a huge boost to be able to get in, deal a bunch of damage, and then get out and not die, so your respawn timer doesn't start again. As well as every zombie has a passive where if you don't take damage for a certain amount of time, you start regenning. So you just jump out, you get your regen, then you hit your projectile, maybe once or twice while you're in the middle of your regen, and then you jump back in, do some damage, jump back out, and that extra health and your ability to block that critical damage, because your weak spots are covered by armor, will be massive in doing a lot more damage. So I think that's definitely what you should be going for. So now at this point, you have level 4 defense, level 1 offense, and level 2 utility. The next thing you should be doing is trying to get offense level 4. Because as I mentioned, 2 and 3 on offense are kind of useless in my opinion, and 3 and 4 on utility are kind of useless in my opinion. But level 4 offense isn't terrible. Every 8 seconds, your next attack is empowered and deals 100% bonus damage, so it does double damage. And that can be big, especially if it's a melee attack, because I don't think it's doubling the damage over time dealt by your projectile. I could be wrong, there's no way for me to test this right now, unfortunately. I think that's what you should go for next, and then if you still have points, then you can get Hinder and then Kill Frenzy on the utility tree. And I think using this method and trying to not overextend to the best of your ability. Sometimes the survivors will have a taser, or a stun gun, I should say, so you pin them, you jump in, you start attacking them, and they use a stun gun, they have a shotgun, they blast you in the face or in the chest, and you just die. Or they might have some sort of grenade or a propane tank that instantly kills you, which is very strong, which I'll mention in the survivor video for PvP. The propane tanks are so strong. So you can't always avoid death, but you really want to try to stay alive, get in, do some damage, get out, regen, and repeat. While your team, like your bruisers and your crushers, are probably going to be dying because they're your tanks, they're going in, they're distracting, and they're taking a lot of damage and dying. You want to be a constant source of damage against the enemy team. I think this is the ideal way to get your upgrades in the order that I just recommended, in my opinion. If you guys have different ways to upgrade that you think are better and you have, a reason behind it, I'd love to hear it in the comments or in my Discord down below, or even in my Twitch stream if you catch me live. Everything in the description, of course. One last tip I'll give you about the Hawker and trying to get maximum efficiency out of playing Hawker is that you want to try to some extent to coordinate with your team. Now, what do I mean by that? So let's say you're fully regened and you're able to use your projectile. You can do it now, or you can wait, say, 4 seconds for your tall boy variant, so either the bruiser or the crusher, to spawn behind the wall and come around. And then you can use your projectile as your tall boy variant is pushing them. Now, why does this matter that much? Well, it makes it so they're less focused on freeing their other cleaner who just got pinned by you. And they're more focused on this massive tank who does decent amount of damage charging at them, whether that be a bruiser or a crusher, rather. And then it gives you time to jump in, slap the guy who's pinned a few times, and jump out, and your tank will probably still die, but you do significantly more damage for your abilities by waiting 4 seconds, rather than using your projectile, hitting someone, and then your cooldown doesn't even start until they're unpinned, and then it's 6 seconds. If you miss, it's only 3 seconds. So if you think you're gonna miss, maybe, but I think just trying to coordinate with your team and push together is a very strong way to do it. Again, there's still like propane strats that could kind of kill your whole team very quickly, and it's hard to avoid them sometimes. It's not a 100% effective tip I'm giving you. You have to kind of play around your current situation, but I think over the long term, it's a more effective method to try to push with your team. You'll deal more damage across many attempts than just trying to go in whenever you can. Now, the exception would be if you're waiting 11 seconds for a respawn, just do it. But if you're waiting 4 seconds, it might be good to wait. And this is something easier coordinated among a team who's on voice chat, which you don't always have. So again, you have to play around your current situation. Now, I know this video is kind of intensive with different mechanics and different things that aren't necessarily fully explained in the beta, but I did have a lot of fun making it. I hope I have enough footage to cover all this. I hope I don't have to replay anything. Maybe I'll just grab some campaign footage if I don't have enough, but hopefully it didn't come to that. If you enjoy this type of video, please let me know, either in the comments, like button. It really mean a lot to me if you enjoyed it, to subscribe. Check out my clip channel. There's some funny stuff over there, Back for Blood content. Join my Discord, follow my Twitch, do all the fun stuff. It really helped me out a lot. It lets me know you enjoy this content, and I know you want to see more, and I can keep going with some other zombies maybe I think aren't quite as strong, but definitely still have some potential. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me for now. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you in another video, and until then, see you soon.